October 15, 1983, and the New River Gorge in West Virginia was ablaze with fall colors. The mountains covered in brilliant reds, oranges, and yellows that drew tourists and locals alike to enjoy the spectacular autumn display. The endless wall trail was a popular hiking path that ran along the rim of the gorge, offering breathtaking views of the New River, hundreds of feet below, and winding through dense forest for approximately 2 miles. Sadie Monroe was 8 years old that Saturday afternoon, a small girl with dark brown hair tied in 2 braids, warm brown eyes, and a quiet nature that made her teachers describe her as thoughtful and observant. She wore a red fleece jacket over a white turtleneck, blue jeans, hiking boots her father had bought for her that summer, and she carried a small backpack containing her water bottle and a sketchbook where she drew pictures of leaves. Sadie had come to the trail with her father, Gregory Monroe, a high school science teacher who loved hiking, and had been bringing Sadie to the New River Gorge since she was old enough to walk steady on uneven terrain. Gregory's wife Claire had stayed home in Charleston with their younger son who was recovering from a cold, so it was just Gregory and Sadie on this father-daughter outing they both cherished. They'd started hiking the endless wall trail at 1:30 p.m., walking at Sadie's pace and stopping frequently so she could sketch interesting leaves, or Gregory could point out geological features of the gorge for her to learn about. At approximately 2:45 p.m., they'd hiked about a mile and reached a section where the trail split, with the main path continuing along the rim and a shorter side trail leading to a scenic overlook about 50 yards away. Gregory suggested they take the short detour to the overlook, so Sadie could see the view and add it to her sketchbook, and they walked together down the narrow side path through thick rhododendron bushes. The overlook was a rocky outcropping with a wooden railing installed for safety, and from this vantage point the New River was visible far below, winding through the gorge like a silver ribbon through the autumn forest. Sadie was delighted by the view and immediately sat on a flat rock to sketch it in her book, and Gregory stood nearby taking photographs with his 35mm camera, capturing both the landscape and his daughter absorbed in her artwork. At 2:52 p.m., Gregory realized he'd left his water bottle on a log back on the main trail where they'd stopped about 3 minutes earlier, maybe 40 yards back before the split toward the overlook. "Sadie, honey, I need to run back and grab my water bottle," Gregory said. "I'll be gone literally 2 minutes. You stay right here on this rock and keep drawing. Don't move from this spot, okay?" Sadie nodded without looking up from her sketchbook, completely focused on capturing the view before her, and Gregory jogged back up the side trail toward the main path to retrieve his water bottle. The side trail was only 50 yards long with good visibility through the trees, and Gregory could see the overlook area from the junction where the trails split, making him comfortable leaving Sadie briefly. He reached the log where he'd left his water bottle, grabbed it, and immediately turned back toward the overlook, the entire detour taking approximately 90 seconds according to his later estimates. When Gregory returned to the overlook at approximately 2:54 p.m., Sadie was not on the rock where he'd left her, and her sketchbook lay open with her pencil beside it, showing the half-finished drawing. Gregory's first thought was that Sadie had stepped behind the bushes briefly, and he called her name while checking the immediate area around the overlook, expecting her to appear within seconds. But seconds became a minute, and Sadie didn't respond to his increasingly urgent calls, and Gregory's concern transformed into genuine fear as he realized his daughter was not anywhere near the overlook. In approximately 90 seconds, while her father retrieved a water bottle 40 yards away on a trail with good visibility, 8-year-old Sadie Monroe vanished from a rocky overlook in West Virginia without making a sound. If this mystery has captured your attention, make sure you're subscribed for more unsolved cases, hit that like button, and comment where you're watching from or what theories you have. Now let's see what happened next. Gregory ran along the main trail in both directions, calling Sadie's name, thinking perhaps she'd gotten confused and walked back the way they'd come or continued forward, but there was no sign of her anywhere. He returned to the overlook and checked over the railing, his heart pounding with terror that Sadie might have fallen. But the cliff face below was unbroken with no signs of disturbance or anything indicating someone had gone over the edge. The sketchbook with Sadie's half-finished drawing and her small backpack were still at the overlook exactly where she'd been sitting, and Gregory grabbed them before running back toward the trailhead to get help. At 3:05 p.m., Gregory reached other hikers on the main trail and frantically explained that his daughter was missing, and within minutes, several people were searching the area while someone drove to the nearest ranger station for assistance. By 3:30 p.m., National Park Service rangers had arrived at the Endless Wall Trail and immediately initiated search protocols for a missing child in the vast wilderness of the New River Gorge. Chief Ranger Michael Thompson coordinated the initial response, organizing hikers present on the trail into search teams to cover the most likely areas where an 8-year-old might have wandered in the brief time she'd been unsupervised. The overlook where Sadie had disappeared was established as the starting point, and teams spread out systematically checking both directions along the main trail and searching off-path areas where a child might have stepped into the woods. Gregory was interviewed by rangers about the exact timeline and whether Sadie had any reason to leave the overlook, any history of wandering off, or any medical conditions that might affect her behavior or decision-making. "Sadie is obedient and careful," Gregory insisted through tears. "She wouldn't just walk away when I told her to stay put. Something happened to her. Someone took her, or she fell somewhere we can't see." The cliff edge near the overlook was examined extensively by rangers who rappelled down to check for any signs that Sadie had gone over. But the vegetation and rock face showed no disturbance suggesting a fall had occurred. Search and rescue teams arrived from surrounding counties by 4:00 p.m., bringing specialized equipment and tracking dogs that would be crucial for searching the dense forest and rugged terrain of the gorge. Bloodhounds were given Sadie's scent from her backpack and the rock where she'd been sitting, and the dogs tracked from the overlook toward the main trail, but then became confused, circling without establishing a clear direction. The handlers reported that the scent seemed to end at the overlook with no trail leading away in any direction, as if Sadie had simply ceased to exist at that spot, a finding that deeply troubled investigators. By dusk, over 100 people were searching the New River Gorge, calling Sadie's name into the forest that was rapidly darkening as sunset approached, and powerful searchlights were set up at the overlook. Claire Monroe arrived at the gorge around 6:00 p.m. after receiving Gregory's devastating phone call, and she was hysterical with fear for her daughter's safety as temperatures began dropping into the low 40s. The theory that Sadie had been abducted by someone who'd been on the trail emerged as a possibility, though rangers noted that the side trail to the overlook had no exit except back to the main trail where Gregory would have seen anyone passing. FBI was contacted given the potential for abduction in a national park area, and Special Agent Catherine Wells arrived from Charleston by 8:08 p.m. to coordinate the federal response. Agent Wells interviewed Gregory extensively about whether he'd seen anyone else on the trail before or after Sadie's disappearance, and Gregory recalled passing 2 couples earlier in their hike, but seeing no one near the overlook. The couples were identified through trailhead parking records and interviewed, and both confirmed seeing Gregory and Sadie earlier, but not witnessing anything concerning or noticing anyone suspicious on the trail. Search efforts continued through the night with teams using thermal imaging helicopters to scan the forest for any heat signature that might indicate a child, but the dense canopy and dropping temperatures made detection difficult. By Sunday morning, the search had expanded to cover a 5-mile radius from the overlook, with over 300 volunteers hiking trails and bushwhacking through trackless forest, calling Sadie's name. The New River itself was searched by boat teams checking the shoreline and shallow areas for any sign that Sadie had somehow ended up in the water, though the cliff face made this scenario seem nearly impossible. Gregory's 90-second absence became the focus of intense scrutiny, with investigators trying to understand how a child could vanish in such a brief window from a location with limited access and no apparent exits. The sketchbook Sadie had been using was examined, and the half-finished drawing showed the gorge view from the overlook, drawn with careful detail that suggested she'd been calm and focused right up until the moment she disappeared. Claire appeared on local television Sunday evening pleading for information about Sadie, holding her daughter's red jacket that had been left in Gregory's car, begging anyone who'd been at the gorge to come forward with information. "Sadie is only 8 years old," Claire sobbed. "She's probably cold and scared and trying to find her way back to us. If anyone has seen her or knows anything, please call the police immediately." By Monday, the case had become regional news, with Sadie's photo appearing across West Virginia and neighboring states, and tips began coming in from people claiming to have seen her at various locations. One hiker reported seeing a man carrying a child wrapped in a blanket on a different trail, about 2 miles from the overlook around 3:30 p.m. Saturday, but investigation found the sighting was of a father carrying his tired daughter. Another witness claimed to have heard a child crying in the woods off the Endless Wall Trail around 3:00 p.m., but search teams found nothing in that area despite extensive investigation. By late October, the intensive daily search operations had been scaled back after 2 weeks of effort. Covering hundreds of square miles produced no trace of Sadie, despite thousands of volunteer hours and extensive professional search teams. The FBI Behavioral Analysis Unit created a profile suggesting that if Sadie had been abducted, it was likely by someone who knew the trail system well enough to move quickly and avoid detection during Gregory's brief absence. This theory led to investigation of everyone who frequently hiked the New River Gorge trails, including local outdoor enthusiasts, park employees, and guides who worked in the area, but none raised red flags or had concerning backgrounds. The possibility that Sadie had wandered off the overlook in a different direction than expected was explored through grid searches extending outward in all directions, but the terrain was so rugged that a small child could be hidden anywhere. Experienced search and rescue personnel noted that the New River Gorge contained countless crevices, caves, and hidden ravines where someone could fall and never be found, and this grim reality haunted the Monroe family. Detective James Morrison of the West Virginia State Police took over the investigation in November, and he became convinced that the key to solving the case lay in understanding exactly what had happened during those 90 seconds. Morrison recreated the timeline repeatedly, walking from the overlook to the log where Gregory had retrieved his water bottle, timing how long it took, and trying to identify any blind spots where someone could have approached unseen. He discovered that there was a brief window, approximately 20 to 30 seconds, when Gregory's back would have been turned while he searched for and grabbed his water bottle, time when someone could have acted at the overlook. But this theory required a perpetrator to have been hiding near the overlook, waiting for precisely this opportunity, and to have subdued an 8-year-old and moved her away without making any noise that Gregory would have heard. The vegetation around the overlook was examined for signs of struggle or passage, but the rocky ground and resilient plants showed no clear evidence of disturbance beyond normal hiking traffic. Gregory was polygraphed and cleared of involvement in Sadie's disappearance, though some investigators privately questioned whether his story about the water bottle was accurate or if something else had occurred. But Gregory's grief was genuine and complete, and he had no motive for harming his daughter, no life insurance policies, no evidence of abuse, nothing that would explain why a loving father would want his child to disappear. The case was featured on Unsolved Mysteries in 1985, and the broadcast generated hundreds of tips from across the country, but each lead was investigated and found to be mistaken identity or well-meaning but inaccurate information. One particularly disturbing tip came from a woman who claimed she'd seen a man carrying a struggling child down a different trail around 3 p.m. that Saturday, but she couldn't provide details specific enough to be useful. By 1986, the active investigation had essentially stopped, with the case remaining open but no detectives assigned to work it full-time, and Sadie Monroe became another child who'd vanished in Appalachian wilderness. Gregory quit teaching and became a recluse, spending most of his time hiking the New River Gorge trails looking for his daughter, and neighbors reported seeing him walking the paths in all weather conditions calling Sadie's name. Claire struggled to function as a parent to their son while grieving Sadie, and the marriage deteriorated under the weight of guilt and blame, ending in divorce in 1988, with both parents unable to move forward together. The red fleece jacket Sadie had been wearing became an iconic image in missing persons cases, and for years hikers in the New River Gorge reported seeing flashes of red in the woods that turned out to be leaves or other natural features. Some locals began referring to the overlook where Sadie disappeared as Monroe Point, and a small memorial cairn appeared there, built by hikers who wanted to honor the missing girl, though Park Service removed it, citing regulations. By 1990, age progression photos showed what Sadie might look like at 15, and these images were distributed, though her parents knew she'd likely died in the gorge in 1983, her body hidden somewhere in the vast wilderness. True crime writers became fascinated with the case in the 1990s, and several books featured chapters about Sadie's disappearance, proposing theories ranging from tragic accident to carefully planned abduction by someone familiar with the terrain. Detective Morrison retired in 2000 but kept copies of Sadie's case file, and he occasionally hiked the endless wall trail himself, standing at the overlook and trying to imagine what had happened in those 90 seconds that had never been satisfactorily explained. The sketchbook with Sadie's half-finished drawing was kept by Claire as her most precious possession, a tangible connection to her daughter's final known moments, and she looked at it daily, wondering what Sadie had been thinking. The years accumulated slowly for the Monroe family, with 1983 becoming 2000 and then 2010, and Sadie's disappearance became part of West Virginia folklore, a cautionary tale about the dangers of the wilderness and the mysteries it could swallow. Gregory Monroe died in 2015 at age 63 from heart failure, and those who knew him said he'd never recovered from losing Sadie, spending over 30 years hiking trails and searching places already searched hundreds of times. His final words to his son were reportedly, "Tell Sadie I never stopped looking and I'll find her now," suggesting he believed death would reunite him with his daughter wherever she was. Claire lived another decade but never remarried or recovered emotionally from October 15, 1983, and she maintained Sadie's bedroom exactly as it had been, with the half-finished sketchbook displayed on the dresser. Sadie's younger brother Daniel, who'd been only 4 when his sister disappeared, grew up in the shadow of the missing girl, and eventually became a search and rescue volunteer, working in the Appalachian region. "I don't remember Sadie clearly," Daniel told a documentary filmmaker in 2020, "but I've spent my entire life defined by her absence, and I help search for other missing people hoping that maybe I can give another family the closure we never got." Detective Sarah Chen was assigned to review the case in 2018 when she joined West Virginia State Police Cold Case Unit, and she approached it with modern technology including advanced mapping and satellite imagery. Chen used LiDAR technology to scan the area around the overlook, looking for hidden ravines or ground features that might have been missed in 1983 searches, and she identified several small caves and crevices worth investigating. Search teams with modern equipment explored these locations in 2019, rappelling into spaces that would have been difficult to access in the 1980s, but they found no evidence of Sadie or anyone else having been in these spots. The theory that Sadie had been abducted remained the most likely explanation, given the complete absence of physical evidence, but identifying who might have taken her after 40 years seemed impossible without witnesses or forensic evidence. Chen interviewed elderly residents who'd been frequent hikers in 1983, asking if they remembered seeing anyone suspicious or unusual around the endless wall trail during that time period, but memories had faded with decades. One former ranger mentioned that there had been reports of a man camping illegally in the gorge area in late 1983, someone who seemed to be living rough in the woods and avoiding contact with authorities. This lead was investigated as thoroughly as possible, but the man had never been identified or apprehended, and whether he'd even existed or was just rumor remained unclear after nearly 40 years. By 2023, Sadie would have been 48 years old, possibly with a career and family of her own if she'd somehow survived, though statistical reality suggested she'd died within hours or days of her disappearance. True crime podcasts rediscovered Sadie's case in the 2020s, and several shows featured detailed episodes analyzing the 90-second window and the impossibility of a child vanishing from such a specific location. Some podcasters suggested that Sadie had been taken by someone who'd been following the Monroe family that day, someone who knew they'd likely take the detour to the overlook and had positioned himself to act when Gregory left. Others believed it was a terrible accident, that Sadie had somehow fallen into a hidden crevice or natural pit that searchers had missed, and her remains were still in the gorge waiting to be discovered. The most disturbing theory proposed that someone had been hiding at the overlook when Gregory and Sadie arrived, waiting in the rhododendron bushes, and had grabbed Sadie the moment her father left. But this theory struggled to explain how such a person could have known the Monroes would come to that specific overlook at that specific time, unless it was purely opportunistic crime by someone who happened to be there. The New River Gorge became a national park in 2020, and the designation brought increased attention to Sadie's case as one of the park's most tragic unsolved mysteries, featured in visitor center displays about safety. Hikers occasionally report finding children's items in the woods, old sneakers or fabric scraps, and each discovery generates hope that Sadie's remains might finally be found. But DNA testing has never matched any items to her. Claire Monroe died in 2024 at age 72, without ever knowing what happened to her daughter, and she was buried holding a photo of Sadie from the morning of the hike, both of them smiling before leaving for the gorge. Her obituary mentioned that she was survived by her missing daughter Sadie, whose disappearance had defined Claire's life and broken her heart in ways that never healed despite decades passing. The overlook where Sadie vanished has been unofficially named Sadie's Overlook by local hikers, And someone regularly leaves flowers there, though park rangers don't know who maintains this memorial. Detective Chen continues to review the case periodically, and she believes that somewhere in the vast New River Gorge, Sadie's remains exist, waiting to be discovered by a hiker or revealed by erosion or landslide. By 2024, Sadie Monroe's disappearance has become one of Appalachia's most haunting unsolved mysteries, discussed in hiking forums and studied by experts trying to understand how a child could vanish from such a specific location in 90 seconds. The half-finished sketch in Sadie's book, showing the gorge view she'd been drawing when she disappeared, has been reproduced in countless articles and documentaries, a poignant reminder of innocence interrupted. Daniel Monroe, now in his mid-40s, continues his search and rescue work and hikes the endless wall trail several times each year, standing at the overlook and trying to feel some connection to the sister he barely remembers. "I come here hoping that maybe this time I'll notice something everyone else has missed," Daniel told a reporter in 2024. "Some clue about where Sadie went or what happened, but the gorge keeps its secrets." The New River Gorge contains over 70,000 acres of rugged wilderness, with countless ravines, caves, and hidden places where remains could be concealed indefinitely, and this reality makes finding Sadie seem almost impossible. Detective Chen maintains that the case could still be solved if the right person comes forward. Someone who was at the gorge that day and saw something they didn't report, or someone who has knowledge they've kept hidden for 40 years. 41 years is a long time to carry a secret, Chen says, and people's consciences work on them, especially as they get older and face their own mortality, and I believe someone out there knows what happened to Sadie. The theory that Sadie was taken by someone who'd been watching and waiting remains the most plausible explanation, but without witnesses or physical evidence, it exists only as an educated guess based on the elimination of other possibilities. The alternative theory that Sadie fell into a hidden natural feature and her remains have simply never been found is equally possible, and some geologists believe the gorge contains unmapped caves and sinkholes that could swallow evidence completely. Modern technology, including drones and advanced ground-penetrating radar, has been used to search areas around the overlook, but the rugged terrain and dense vegetation limit what can be detected from above or through soil. The case stands as a reminder of how quickly children can vanish even under careful supervision, and how wilderness areas can conceal secrets that resist decades of searching and investigation. And it highlights the unique torture faced by families of the missing, who live in perpetual limbo, unable to grieve fully, because death isn't confirmed yet unable to hope realistically after so much time has passed. Hikers on the endless wall trail occasionally report uncomfortable feelings near the overlook, though most attribute this to knowledge of Sadie's disappearance rather than anything supernatural, and some avoid the spot entirely. Park rangers who work in the New River Gorge are trained on Sadie's case and instructed to be vigilant for any evidence that might emerge through erosion, storm damage, or wildlife activity that could expose hidden remains. The red fleece jacket Sadie wore that October day has never been found, despite being a distinctive item that should have been visible if discarded in the forest, and its absence suggests it left the area with whoever took Sadie. True crime communities continue to debate the case online, proposing theories about how someone could have moved an 8-year-old from the overlook in 90 seconds without making noise that Gregory would have heard 40 yards away. Some believe Gregory's timeline was inaccurate, that he was gone longer than 90 seconds and his memory compressed the time due to trauma, but multiple reviews of his account found it consistent and credible. Others think Sadie wandered off in a direction searchers didn't adequately cover, perhaps climbing down the cliff face on a route that seemed impossible for a child, but that she attempted anyway, leading to a fall into an inaccessible location. The sketchbook with its unfinished drawing sits in a West Virginia State Police evidence room, preserved as the last tangible evidence of Sadie's existence, and Chen looks at it occasionally when reviewing the case. The drawing shows careful attention to detail, the river winding through the gorge, trees on the far slopes, all rendered in an 8-year-old's earnest attempt to capture beauty she was seeing, interrupted by something she never saw coming. Daniel has stated he wants to donate his parents' collection of Sadie's belongings to a missing persons museum when he dies, ensuring his sister isn't forgotten even after everyone who knew her personally is gone. The annual memorial hike, organized by search and rescue groups every October 15th, draws dozens of people who walk the endless wall trail to the overlook, honoring Sadie and all children who've vanished in wilderness areas. At the overlook, participants stand in silence for 90 seconds, the length of time Sadie was alone before her father returned to find her gone, and the silence is profound and unsettling. Those 90 seconds changed everything, a participant said at the 2023 memorial. They destroyed a family, created a mystery that's never been solved, and remind us how fragile safety is even in beautiful places. And in the vast New River Gorge, where autumn still paints the mountains in brilliant colors every October, the answer to what happened to Sadie Monroe may still exist, hidden in a place no searcher has yet reached. But until that answer emerges, if it ever does, Sadie remains among the missing. Her disappearance an enduring mystery that challenges our understanding of how completely someone can vanish from a specific location. The overlook where she was last seen continues to offer the same breathtaking view she'd been sketching, unchanged by decades, while the forest around it keeps whatever secrets it holds about the little girl in the red jacket. Detective Chen believes that nature may eventually reveal Sadie's location through erosion, or landslide, or some shift in the landscape that exposes what has been hidden, and she's instructed future investigators to remain vigilant. The gorge has kept Sadie for 41 years, Chen says, but rock and soil shift over time, and eventually the earth gives up its secrets, and I believe someday a hiker will find something that brings this case to a close. But as of today, more than 4 decades after Sadie Monroe sat on a rock drawing a picture of the New River Gorge, her fate remains completely unknown, and her case remains one of Appalachia's most baffling unsolved mysteries. The last image of Sadie shows her absorbed in her artwork, peaceful and content in that moment before her father walked 40 yards away to retrieve a water bottle, unaware that in 90 seconds his life would shatter. And somewhere in West Virginia, in the vast wilderness of the New River Gorge, or in memories someone has kept hidden for 41 years, the answer to what happened to Sadie Monroe exists, waiting to be discovered.